which is that there are certain types of concepts, and ideas that you have to be familiar with as an MBA student. And so what we'll be doing in legal aspects of business is I have selected those ideas and those principles, and we will go through them. And so your job is really to ensure that this is basically what you need to know. These are the things, the stuff we will be studying are the things that we need to know as a business student, the aspects of the law that you need to be aware of. And we will teach it in a very intensive manner, more intensive than what is done in an LLB program. But it will be beneficial for you, because if you're doing it properly, you will get a very good insight into how judges ultimately decide cases. And that will give you insight even when you later on, if you are doing something like contract drafting, some of you might go into HR. In HR, you do a lot of employment contract drafting, right? And other kinds of contracts in a commercial sense. It'll give you a lot of insight, because even contract drafting and agreement drafting, if you do loan agreements and things like that, or tenancy agreements, everything has to be done eventually with an eye on how a judge is going to decide that case. Because when you draft an agreement, you have to assume that everything that could possibly go wrong will go wrong. And then eventually it goes to litigation. And so how will the judge decide the case? So when you're drafting a contract or any other kind of legal document, what is going through your head is how a judge would decide this case if it ever came to litigation. All right. So therefore, or arbitration, which is another form of resolving the dispute. So therefore, it's very important. So that's why the focus of this course is to give you a very intensive grilling and give you some comfort level with understanding the principles based on which judges would decide certain cases. And so that's what we're going through. So this is a slightly unusual module that you find. In most business schools, in legal aspects of business, there is this kind of module does not exist, jurisprudence and legal theory. But I think it's important because it gives you the theoretical frameworks to understand how decisions are being taken by judges. So it's important to understand some of these ideas. Okay. So we first start. So what we'll be doing essentially is there'll be a bunch of concepts that I'll be throwing at you, and this is all written down in notes, and this note is already in your folder. Okay, if you see in your unit notes folder, this is already your student folder. All the stuff which we have discussed is already here, and the unit 0 labs, I'll move the unit 0 notes also into this, okay, which we can do. So unit 1, which I'm now teaching, is already here. There will also be a spreadsheet which I will put into your notes. I'm going to move this into unit notes. Alright, so your unit 0 is also here. Alright, okay, so what we are going to do, we are going to just go through a bunch of concepts initially before we get into the cases, the actual judgments that we are going to study once we get into the particular modules like contract law, company law, etc. And your job is to essentially understand these concepts. So my role really as a teacher is not so much to make it interesting to you, because you need to be interested in this stuff, but really to explain the concept to you. So if you don't understand a concept, I'm happy to explain it 14 times. And your role is to basically pay attention in the class, and so that you understand what is being said. And then if you don't understand, you have to ask a question. Even if you don't understand a little bit, you should ask. That's your only duty, to pay attention and to ask questions. And if you don't understand, I'll explain it as many times as required. So that is my role. Is this clear? Okay, so please let's move accordingly. So the first idea that we are going to discuss is the first unit is called jurisprudence and legal theory. Now, what is jurisprudence? It's a big word. So let's understand this point. Okay, what does it mean? So we use the word jurisprudence in two ways. That is, there's a little bit of font types are mixed up, as you can see here. This font is Arial, this font is Meriwether, but this kind of stuff is because we're not really focused on niceties like this. But later on, when you do marketing and stuff, please be careful. You'll notice something. You can do this experiment for yourself. If you're designing a poster, one of the cardinal rules is you should not mix font type because visually it will create dissonance for somebody if you're designing a marketing poster. You can experiment with this. Don't mix. You understand what I mean by font types?
Yes, sir.
This is Arial. Okay, this is a different font, Meriwether. If you mix up font types in a body of text when somebody's reading it, it creates visual dissonance. Dissonance, you understand, it's like lack of harmony, a little bit of disturbance. So these are all finer points you have to think about when you're designing, when you're looking looking at marketing aspects, designing posters, this, that, billboard design, everything that is visual. If you design, be aware of this. But in this class, we are not going to bother because this is just meant for our mutual convenience. Okay. All right. Okay. First point, jurisprudence. What does it mean? It's generally used in two senses. Either we use it to refer to the entire body of laws, and the body of laws, this means acts and judgments, texts. Somebody may write a big textbook on contract law. All that forms part of our jurisprudence. So we would use this, we would say something like the Indian jurisprudence on contract law. So that includes like Mullah on the law of contract, that includes the Contract Act, that includes all the judicial decisions that have been handed down on the Contract Law Act. So we refer to this entire body of laws, and we would say the Indian jurisprudence on the Contract Act, okay, or on the law of contract. Okay, we can say the same thing about Indian jurisprudence on income tax, etc., etc. Is this clear? The first way you use the word, right? We're also going to, because you also remember that your MBA students, you're not going into the world marketing yourself as a hardcore programmer or a hardcore mechanical engineer, technical specialist. So you have to have certain other types of skills. So one of those skills is that you should be very good in the use of the language. Your communication skills should be superb, and you should have the ability to integrate all the different areas. And law is one of the areas that you will have to integrate into everything. Operations, into marketing, into because marketing you have concerns like false advertising. The Consumer Protection Act covers all those kinds of things. So you have to have that lawyer's hat on all the time, even if you're a marketing guy or operations guy or a finance guy. So this is one of the things that you bring in, and the use of the language. So how to use the words? Jurisprudence can be used either to refer to the entire body of laws or also to the study of this body of laws. Okay, so when you have the science or the study of when you talk about jurisprudence, it's about the study of how these laws should be developed and all these aspects. So it's used in two senses. So it is the study of the above or the science of the above. So we can say study or science. Okay, science is used in a loose sense, not in the sense of physics and chemistry, because law is not really a science in that sense, right? But study or science or the philosophy of how the body of law should develop. So it's used in two, the same word is used in two senses. So you have to understand what sense it's being used in. All right, is this clear? So now, similar to jurisprudence, there's another word which is also used, which is one word, also used in a similar way in two senses. This word, have you guys seen this word before? Taxonomy. So you need to learn some. Walia has seen it. You're familiar?
Yes.
Okay, what does taxonomy mean?
The type of taxonomy on economy, like you can say.
Taxonomy on the economy.
Taxonomy.
No, effects of tax on the economy. No. That's not what it means.
I don't know deeper about a thing about the laws.
No, so taxonomy is as already written here in your notes. Okay, so taxonomy is a word that is used in two senses. Okay, just like in jurisprudence we had put study of the above. Okay, study of the entire or the science of the entire how these body of laws is developed, analyzing this body of laws, etc. And so in that sense, in this second sense here, which is we have put it first here, that taxonomy is essentially the science of classification. If you remember, everyone remembers your biology class, you have all these genus, species,
Yes, sir.
mammals, like human beings are mammals, but then all mammals are not humans, right? So we are called Homo sapiens in that classification. Now dogs are also mammals, but dogs you would not call Homo sapiens because they are not in that category, right? So this entire business of this science of classifying a set of objects into certain reasonable categories, this is what is called taxonomy, which is the science of classification of, broadly similar in the sense like dogs and humans and dolphins are similar because we are all living beings, and then we are also mammals, but then we have some further under mammals there are further classifications because we are not exactly like dolphins, right? So therefore there are certain further categories made for human beings. All right, so therefore
what is basically taxonomy based on a law rules and regulations.
Yeah, so taxonomy is another word which is important for you guys to be aware of, because it is important for you as an MBA student to develop the skill of taxonomy. But the point is, the reason I thought of this word is because it's very similar to jurisprudence, in the sense that jurisprudence is also one word which is used in two different ways, slightly different contexts, and taxonomy is also used in two exactly similar contexts. So taxonomy first is the study of the science of classification. It's actually not, there should be a bracket here. Study of classification, or science of classification. They need to have study of science of. Okay, so either you study what are the principles, that is, in this case, in the first sense of taxonomy, you ask yourself, okay, what are the principles according to which we should classify these entities or these objects, right? What are the principles, what are the laws? We'll discuss some principles below, right? So this is a taxonomy, that what basis should we classify these, and how should we classify these? If you're asking questions like that, you're talking about taxonomy as a science of classification, all right? And this is one which is science of the above, and then this is the entire body of law. So I'm going to highlight all this. It will also make it easier for you to study, so you know these are the key words, right? But don't memorize, guys, please. Okay, remember I told you in the first session that now you are in a different paradigm. That business of mugging up stuff in your undergrad is over. Now you're studying for a professional degree. Companies are interested in people who can do things for them. For that, you need to have conceptual clarity. So this business of mugging up stuff is not going to help you in the corporate world. In the corporate world, people expect you to have very good communication skills, good conceptual skills, good knowledge of the domain, which means everything that's going on in your domain you should be aware of. If you're a marketing guy, you should know everything that's going on, not just in India, in the US. If some new Disney channel has come up, you should be aware of it. And so full domain knowledge, conceptual, news, everything. And also what was I saying? So conceptual clarity is what matters, and if you try to mug up things, you will not have conceptual clarity. Is this clear? Are you getting the message? You need to be talking to yourself every day, because you're conditioned from your early days to mug up stuff. Our education system is like that. You're conditioned, so you need to get out of that mode. Now it's in a different mode. You need to be focused on understanding concepts. So I'm making it very easy for you. I'm giving you all the notes and everything. I'm highlighting the keywords, but I don't want people sitting on the stairs in the last day before the exam, science of classification, going like this. Okay, that is not going to help you in the corporate world. Okay, this is a different ball game now. You need to focus on understanding concepts. All right. You understand it in your own way. Think about it. The way you do it is basically you pay attention in the class, and then when you go back, maybe once in a week, you revise what's been taught, and then you try to understand it in your own way. Alright, so first is taxonomy, the science of classification. How should we classify? What kind of categories? Second is a particular classification is also referred to as taxonomy. Okay, so in the first sense of jurisprudence, where you're referring to the existing body of laws on the law of contracts in India. Okay, that is, you say the current Indian jurisprudence on contract law. Okay, that is, you're referring to the current set of laws. So similarly, you can use the word taxonomy also to refer to a particular classification. That means, for instance, if I take all the students on this campus, and let's assume there are only 4 courses, LLB, LLM, MCA and BCA. So then I take all the students and I put them into each of these boxes. So this guy is an MCA. So obviously if you're an MCA student, you're not an LLB student, right? So I take all the students and I classify them into LLM students, LLB students, MCA and BCA students. 4 categories. And this I would call a taxonomy of VIP students. Are you following? There's another way you use the word taxonomy. Now I'm not using it in the sense of science of classification. I'm now referring to a particular classification. Is this clear? You can also have another taxonomy of VIP students saying male and female. Okay, wearing glasses or not wearing glasses, that's also another taxonomy, right? So the way you do the taxonomy depends partly on what your objective is. Is this clear? Are you following? You're getting the use of the word taxonomy. All these things are being taught to you because taxonomy is very important, and also that you need to be fairly sophisticated in the use of the language. The way you use the English language, you need to be pretty good at that. Those of you who are weak in English, you need to work on it. If you need tips, I can give you more tips on how to do it, because that is one of the things that people will expect of MBAs. Alright? Okay, is this clear now? So 2 new words you've learned, jurisprudence and taxonomy. Both of them are used in 2 different senses, and those 2 different senses are quite similar. Okay, now certain important principles of taxonomy which you should follow. Okay, so let's take an example. If I have a taxonomy of VIP students saying, let's say LLB, let's say now there are only two courses. I say LLB, LLM and females. LLB students, LLM students and females. What is the problem with this taxonomy? Good. So yeah, males are excluded, that's one problem. And somebody used the word mutually exclusive. This is the problem, because some of the females will be LLB students, some of the females will be LLM students. So where do you put them, right? So you can't have that. So that's why the first principle of taxonomy is, these principles are important. I'll explain briefly why later on. But the first principle of good taxonomy is that these are taxa. The taxa are the categories. Okay, so when I create a taxonomy of VIP students saying LLB, LLM, BCA, MCA. Now here that there are 4 taxa. In this classification there are 4 taxa. Okay, LLB, LLM, BCA, MCA. Okay, what happened, Priya?
So there is some very bad smell, I can't understand.
Okay, there's some bad smell there. Okay, no problem. Okay, fine. All right. Okay, just okay. So is this clear? The use of the word taxa also, that's another new word for many of you probably. So the taxa must be mutually exclusive. You can't have a taxonomy saying LLB, LLM, females. Yeah.
Can you read the meaning of taxonomy?
Taxa is just categories. So in any taxonomy you will have taxa is basically here, see, slash categories. So in this example, let's take this example. So if I have classified VIP students into LLB, LLM, MCA, BCA. In this case I have 4 taxa. If I classify them into male and female, I have only 2 taxa. Clear? Alright. Wearing glasses, not wearing glasses, again 2 taxa. Okay. So whatever taxa I have, the category should be mutually exclusive. That is the first principle. Alright. For it to be meaningful. Second is that you should minimize the level of high level taxa. Okay. Which is not minimize the level, minimize the number. Okay. What do we mean by that? Now let's understand this. You can look at my own taxonomy a little bit. So these are all, I do everything in Google Drive. I don't even have anything offline unless I have to. So now one of the categories is DSB VIPs. Okay, so there is everything related to D, and then later on there are some other categories which you can see very low down. I mean, all DSB admin. After that, maybe ebooks by subject is another category. So DSB VIPs and ebooks by subject is on the same level. Are you following what I'm saying? Are you guys following? Like male and female high level. Then I further divide the females and the males into wearing glasses, not wearing glasses. Okay. Then further I can divide those who are wearing glasses, say living in North Delhi, not living in North Delhi. I can keep on doing classifications like this. So DSB VIPs is one high level category. You can see another high level category, DSB deletion folder. Okay, that's one. So under DS, now we are going into one of the high level categories. Okay, now you can see under DSB VIPs I have academics as one category. Now you can see under DSB VIPs what are the other high level categories. Under what is academics, then there is admin, there's comms, consulting, finance lab, marketing, mixed, etc. These are all different high level categories at this level. Okay, within this. So what we are saying is, and now you can see the sub branches. Under academics, I've got academics for each semester. Sometimes 2 courses are taught in one semester. Under academics, you can see then here under academics you can see this academics for each semester. Then this particular semester you can see there's a course. Then you can see under that there's a subtopic. Okay, then you can see student folder. I think you get the idea by now, right? Are you following what is being shown here? You can see this, how you organize information. Okay, it's very important to have a good system of organizing information, because otherwise there's too much information in the world. So you may suffer information overload, and it is important for you to actually scan all the information. At the same time, you should not be working with incomplete information. You have to scan all the information, and there's a lot of information. So you need to have a system of organizing information properly. This is where principles of taxonomy become very important. Not just for information, sometimes you're in a very unstructured situation. But now I think you understand what is meant by high level. Okay. So here these are high level categories and these are low level categories. Now if you go down to say here, then this is like a low level. If you're going down to derivatives at this level, it is much lower level than this. This is clear? What I mean by high level, low level categories? Okay.
So how can we see this as a legal aspect? Like
I'm coming to that. It's not so much a legal aspect, but some of this discussion is also for general skills that you need to have as an MBA student, and I'm coming to that. Okay, so we are just talking about the principles of good taxonomy. First is mutually exclusive categories. Second is minimize the number of high-level taxa. And to help you with that, which is don't have too many high-level taxa at the top level. Have few, and then there we are, and to allow you to do principle 2, we are giving you some freedom in principle 3. You can freely add levels in the taxonomy. What is a level? Level is like this. Here you can see this is first level. You can say 0 level, first level, second level is also second level, third level, fourth level. Here this is fifth level. Are you following? So be free to add levels in the taxonomy, but high level taxa should be minimized as far as possible. If you can bring something into a group, you bring it into a group. Are you clear? Okay, so these are some basic principles. Now we'll see. Now why is this important? Why are we even having this discussion? In most business schools you will not have this discussion. Why do we do this? Because, and one of the things that you are expected to have as an MBA student is the skill of being able to remember the strategic thinking. Part of the strategic thinking skill set is being able to bring structure to an unstructured situation. Okay, to trying to bring structure, because most of the time when you look at problems in the business world, they are very unstructured. You go into a situation where there's a lot of complexity, there's a lot of information, and a lot of entities, a lot of actors, and it looks very unstructured, and you have to bring structure to that situation, because without structure, human beings can't operate. We need some kind of structure to get an idea of what exactly are we trying to do here. Okay, so now the skill of taxonomy is very useful because essentially most of the unstructured stuff comes in the form of information. So if you have this practice of doing good taxonomy, you'll be able to organize information into meaningful, and remember once again, the kind of taxonomy is that you do is also driven by what is your objective. Like with students, I can classify into male and female, wearing glasses, not wearing glasses, taller than 6 feet, less than 6 feet, all kinds of classifications are possible. So what kind of classification you choose depends on what is your objective. What are you trying to do? What is the objective of the taxonomy? Okay, but the point is to understand these basic principles of good taxonomy and develop a skill. Whenever you go around in your life, you see situations and try to see if here's a situation which is kind of unstructured. How do I organize the information? Are you following what I'm saying? This is something you need to develop because it will be very useful to you. This is one of the things that people expect from MBA students: the ability to put structure onto an unstructured environment. This is clear? Okay, it's a little bit abstract, but just think about it. Okay.
so like government earlier there is a different tax structure. There are so many acts. So many. Government has demolished many of the act and restructured all of them.
Repealed. The word that we would use, what Gagan is saying, government has demolished many of the previous acts.
Repealed.
What we would say in a using legal lingo, we would say the government has repealed. But that was one of the agenda items of this Modi government, that they are going to repeal a lot of the old laws, because in India we have many laws which are on the books which are not being really enforced. Okay, maybe they have lost their relevance, but they were on the books. So they wanted to repeal some of these laws. So the expression we use is they have repealed.
The government has add some of the acts in a particular one act. Like there's a 10 act, and government has demolished 5 to 10. And
don't say demolished. Now you say repealed.
Repealed.
Okay.
And add them to the in the 1 to 5.
Yeah. Okay. So for instance, like taxonomy. So that is what you were saying is they have done that
In a such a way.
in a systematic way. So one of the ways, like if you take off from Gagan's earlier question, what happened here? Who is this? Aman. Lokesh. Okay.
So that one can find the information on particular act.
Yeah. So one of the things you can do. But if you go back to Gagan's earlier question, which is important, that what is the value of taxonomy from a legal perspective? Taxonomy is valuable in many situations. But in from a legal perspective, if you're trying to study the body of laws in a country, you can organize them further into, let's say, commercial laws, criminal laws, okay, all kinds of laws on technology, which is also part of the sub-part of the commercial laws. So you can see here we have all these different acts. This is the income tax website. They have a lot of these acts. You can see all kinds of acts. Then you can say within finance, within commercial laws, you can have banking related laws. So you can do all kinds of, there are many situations where taxonomy will be very useful in organizing information. Okay, I'm sure you're used to it already, but we are just giving you a certain kind of structure and certain principles to play with. Okay, does that clarify your question? Okay, all right. Okay guys, so these are some new things that you've learned. Okay, now let's go on to our next topic, which is, so remember this is going to be lecture tutorial style mostly, but make sure that you understand these are things you need to learn. Okay, are you guys familiar with these ideas, the three organs of the state?
Yes, sir.
And you are familiar? Okay, the separation of powers. Okay, good. So this is actually a theory that comes from this French writer called Baron Montesquieu, separation of powers. So how do we separate the powers? We create three branches of government. Okay, so we have the three organs of the state. We say the legislature. So we want to be very careful about how we use words. Once again, remember how to use words. Okay, so the legislature, we either say the legislature, the executive, the judiciary. Okay, either we say this or we say that branches of government, three branches of government. We say legislative branch, executive branch, and we don't say judiciary branch. We say judicial branch. Okay, is this clear? Very particular about the use of words. Yeah, it's the same, but the categories are the same, but the language is slightly different. So we are saying when we use the word branch, then we say we don't, the point of this is to make sure that nobody says judiciary branch.
How will it be different?
No, it's not different. What I'm saying is, no, in the sense, we are saying here that there are three branches or three organs of the state. The legislature, the executive and the judiciary. The entities are the same, okay? So categories are the same. It's just two different ways of using the language. Either you say three organs of the state, the legislature, the executive and the judiciary, or you say three branches of government. You say legislative branch, executive branch, and you don't say judiciary branch, you say judicial branch. That's all, okay? We just want to be very particular about the use of language. Very important. Okay. Is this clear now? So the idea in the theory of separation of powers, which is quite important, in the theory of separation of powers, the idea is that we want to prevent tyranny. Okay, so what we are doing is we are organizing government into three organs. The state is organized into three organs, and each organ has a specific set of functions. And so because the powers, the functions are essentially, to perform the functions you need to have powers. Okay, so therefore the powers are separated between the three organs, and that's how we have separation of powers. That's what separation of powers refers to. Now what are the powers? The power to the legislature, is this clear? Makes laws. You're familiar, some of you are familiar with this. Legislature makes laws. The executive enforces the law. Okay, the term that we use is enforces the law. Okay, and we can just say executes and enforces the law. And then the judiciary interprets the law, because sometimes you may have a confusion. It's very common that you have confusions about what does the law, what does it actually mean. The law may say certain things, but what does it mean in a particular situation? All right. So therefore, there's a confusion about that, and that has to go to the judiciary for an interpretation as to what is the correct interpretation of the law. Alright, so the point you're learning here in this particular submodule is the concept of separation of powers and the three organs of the state. Alright, so these three branches. Right, so this is the idea here is that why did Montesquieu suggest that the separation, this kind of government, which you now find in most countries, which are like, say, the Western style liberal democracy model, if you see any,
So that there should not be the misuse of power.
Yeah, misuse of power, abuse of power. Like for instance, if you see the North Korean constitution is almost like promising a paradise on earth. Everybody has a right to education, right to food, right to everything. But in fact, what happens is all power is concentrated, but they actually don't have anything. Like they're eating grass. Okay, but that's because all the power is concentrated in Kim Jong-un, right? So because you have concentration of power, so he decides who is guilty, he decides what law has been broken, and he decides the punishment also. right? Like he blows people off using cannons, gets them eaten by dogs and things like that. So, so therefore, the problem that you have in North Korea is not that they don't have a constitution, but because you don't have separation of powers, all power is concentrated in one person, all right, or one entity. So that's why you have a problem of tyranny. You understand the word tyranny?
Yes, sir.
Okay, tyranny means like oppressive rule by one person or a small group of persons. Okay, so the idea here in the separation of powers, a best example of separation of powers, purest example is in the US Constitution, and the idea is that the reason that you have managed to maintain a lot of individual liberty in the US is because there is a very strict separation of powers. So what happens is, this is also referred to, if you read some of the links here, okay, you'll see this is also referred to as a system of checks and balances. Yeah, so this is also called a system of checks and balances, because each branch is acting as a check on the other. Each branch, yeah.
I have a question, like you said that separation of power is must for a liberal society.
For a? Yeah.
So you said that separation of power is must for a liberal or a democratic. But there is
no, it's only a must. Let me correct my statement. It's only a must to prevent tyranny. And it so happens that separation of powers to some degree or the other is a feature of these modern Western style liberal democracies, of which India is also one. Okay, so India, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, UK, USA, all these are the same broad model. Yeah, separate. All these have separation of powers. Yeah, yeah. I'll come to you.
There can be a justification for, like, if the parliament make a law,
yeah,
and the Supreme Court can oppose it.
Yeah.
It can the judgment given by the Supreme Court can be overruled by the Parliament.
Yeah, so your very good question actually. So you have actually jumped several steps ahead. So we'll go slowly. Okay. So what we have done? What's your name? Shubham Arora. Okay. So now what he has jumped several steps ahead. Okay. So what he has done is so let's first understand checks and balances. All right. Checks and balances essentially are that one branch is acting as a check on the other. So for instance, if you take this current controversy about the CAA, what has happened is the Parliament has passed the law, okay, and it has gone through the normal process. The President has signed it and all that. So it has become an act, but it has been challenged. The constitutional validity of this act has been challenged by some people before the Supreme Court. Now, whatever the Supreme Court says, they may agree with the government, or they may decide that it's unconstitutional. So if they just assume that, for the example, for the sake of argument, the Supreme Court decides that this law is unconstitutional, then the law cannot be enforced by the executive branch. Okay, so because remember, these guys make the law, these guys interpret the law, and these guys enforce the law. But in a constitutional democracy, the judiciary also usually has another job, and that is to decide whether certain laws are constitutionally valid or not. Okay, so this is what. So this is the idea. Are you first able to understand the concept of checks and balances? Yes. That Parliament, if they make a law, the judiciary can actually overrule that. Okay, but turn that down on the ground of it being unconstitutional. I'm coming to the second part which you asked. Yeah.
So, like, what is tyranny used? Is it equivalent to autocratic?
Yeah. Tyranny is autocratic. Tyranny is autocratic. It's basically oppressive rule by tyranny is used in the sense of a negative. It has a negative connotation. So it's oppressive rule by either one person or a small group of persons. All right. So tyranny, autocratic, you can say that. Okay. Autocratic has a less of a negative connotation than tyranny. Autocratic is more focused on the process of decision making. Okay, so it has less of a negative connotation, but tyranny is always used in a negative sense. Okay, now coming to the second question that Arora asked, which is, the first part is clear, how checks and balances are happening. Okay, that the constitutional validity of a law can be questioned by the Supreme Court, by somebody coming to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court may rule. For instance, you guys might remember the National Judicial Appointments Commission Act, NJAC Act, you remember, several years ago, in the first term of the NDA government, the previous term, they passed this law to essentially bring, because currently the system of judges, the way we select High Court, Supreme Court judges is completely under the control control of the judiciary, okay, which is not the case in any other country in the world. Okay, in the US, for instance, president will appoint the Supreme Court justices, so the executive has a strong say in the appointment of judges. But in India, it was all it still is under the control of the judiciary, the higher judiciary. So here, what is happening is the government wanted to bring some more element of control from the executive branch. They came up with this NJSC Act, but it was deemed to be unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. So therefore that act was not able to go into force. Okay, it is not part of our legal system. So that's another example of checks and balances, where the parliament passes a law according to its proper procedure, but the Supreme Court says this law is unconstitutional. This is clear? Now, as far as this is concerned here, what they are saying is, as the second question that you asked, which happened a lot in the case of, it has happened in the sales tax legislation also, many tax cases. What happens is, when the government loses a case before the Supreme Court, they go back and they change the laws, right? They change the laws in such a way that the effect of the Supreme Court decision is nullified. Like you might have heard of the Vodafone judgment, the famous Vodafone judgment of 2012, where there's several, I think several $1 billion claims by the income tax department on Vodafone were actually nullified by the Supreme Court. The government won in the Bombay High Court, but it was nullified by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said these claims are not valid. But then the government went back and amended the law. Alright, so what happens is, basically, if the government says, when the judiciary effectively interprets the law to be unconstitutional, if they can make a constitutional amendment. So what Aurora is talking about is a situation where it happens a lot in the tax laws, and it has also happened in our you guys are all familiar with reservation?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so this is also a big political issue in our country. So reservation, what has happened historically is that the governments have tried to increase the reservation categories over the years. Okay, how many people, which classes are covered, and how much is to be given for reserve quota, right? So this also, what has happened is that because if you have a sufficient parliamentary majority, you can amend the constitution. So the Supreme Court on one occasion says that, okay, this law is unconstitutional based on what the constitution says currently. Based on the current wording of the constitution, it is unconstitutional. But if parliament can go back and amend the constitution, then it will no longer be unconstitutional, because what they do when they do these amendments is, they see the Supreme Court judgment exactly what it says, and then they go and change the words exactly in that manner, so that the effect of that judgment is nullified. Are you following what we are saying?
Yes.
Okay, before we just make sure that everybody follows all the steps. Yes, are we all following? First is checks and balances. Second is, sometimes, which are more refined point that Aurora raised, which is, what about all these parliamentary amendments? Those are constitutional amendments, which if you have a sufficiently large majority in parliament, you can amend the constitution. Okay, it's pretty easy to amend the Indian constitution, and therefore then what they do is they effectively nullify the impact of the judiciary. So in a way you can say that because in India the constitutional amendments, we are already over 100 now. I think GST was the 100th or the 101st amendment. Okay, so because in India it's very easy to amend the constitution. It's very easy to amend the constitution. You don't even need a majority of parliament. If some of them are just absent, that will also favor the amendment. Okay, so you can just kind of incentivize people not to be present in the class in parliament, etc. So this is basically the problem that you're highlighting here. Okay, because it's very easy to amend the Indian constitution, therefore you could actually say that by making the Indian constitution so easy to amend, we have actually diluted the extent to which the checks and balances are able to function. Separation of powers is essentially a system of checks and balances. Are you able to follow what we are saying?
Yes, sir.
You need to understand how your country works. This is also important. These broader constitutional understanding is also important. That effectively what we have done in our country, by making the constitution so easy to amend, what we have done is we have diluted the extent to which the separation of powers actually acts as a system of checks and balances, because the judicial check on the legislative branch is effectively diluted by frequent amendments to the constitution. Are you following? Usually when they say that when the judiciary says that the particular law is unconstitutional. They are talking about the current text of the constitution. So if you go back and change the current text, then the judiciary will have to give a different interpretation. Are you following what we are saying? Right? So it's like if I make a rule saying that food will be served only up to 8 p.m. then you can say that whoever comes after 8 p.m. you don't serve them food. But then if I go back and rewrite the rule and say food has to be served whenever somebody comes to the table, so in that case you can no longer say that after 8 p.m. we won't serve you, right? So it's like the constitutional interpretation, the text is also already changed. So the point before coming back to you, what I'm trying to emphasize is that the ease of amendment of the Indian Constitution essentially dilutes the extent to which the separation of powers in India acts as a effective system of checks and balances. Effectively, we have a very strong parliamentary system. Essentially, Parliament is supreme by and large. Okay, that's effectively what is happening. Yes, what is the question?
Sir, you said that
Yeah.
you talked about that. Sir, I want to highlight your point that during the time of emergency, there was amendment in constitution. So it would have led to terror.
Yeah, so that's another example which I gave in the other class. All right, that which is that the emergency is an example of tyranny. Okay, and because what happened again in the emergency is that the judiciary essentially folded. These guys did not do their job. The Supreme Court essentially was afraid of Indira Gandhi, so they did not do their job and they did not uphold the fundamental rights in the way that they should have. And today, it's not just my opinion, because today's Supreme Court, including the son of one of the people who were, there was the Justice Chandrachud was one of the people on the bench when they agreed to whatever Indira Gandhi said. But his son Dhananjay Chandrachud has now actually said that those decisions during the emergency were not correct. Okay, so today's Supreme Court has admitted that the judiciary did not do its job during the emergency. They should have actually resisted Indira Gandhi, but they did not do that. So essentially, by and large, you had historically also in India, the structure of the constitution also ensures that effectively Parliament has a lot of, the legislative branch is almost supreme. Okay, so the system of checks and balances is not working very well, and this is something you should be aware of as a citizen. Okay, and you should be aware of the design and how it's been corrupted. Yeah.
What is the criteria to amend the constitution?
Okay, I don't know the exact, but it's basically something like 2/3 of those. We can look it up. We can look it up on the. We can look at the constitution. I'll bring it up the next time. Okay. Yeah, 2/3 how they present and voting. Present and voting. So what? If I have actually there is full strength of Parliament is 100 seats. I just make sure that only 30 are present. I incentivize the other guys to go somewhere else. And they are not present, so they don't count. So all I need is basically 2/3 of 30. Okay, so that's basically almost jocular. They should not have done this. And see, one more thing you guys should be aware of is we are having this discussion without writing down too much. That the US Constitution has been amended. The US has been there almost for 250 years. If you look at the birth of the country, 1780 roughly, rounded off. Okay, and there's almost 250 years. And how many times the US Constitution been amended? I think it's only 26 times. Okay, so 250 years, only about 26 times. And which country is more economically, militarily powerful, US or India? US. Most dominant military economic power in the history of the world, essentially you can say. Well, maybe you can say the British were very powerful compared to the other countries. So only 26 amendments to the US Constitution in 250 years. So that means one thing we can clearly say is that the ease of amendment of the Constitution is not a factor in becoming an economic and military power. Is this clear? You agree? I mean, you understand what I'm trying to say here? This is very clear because the US Constitution is very difficult to amend. Very, very difficult. You need basically Congress to pass 2/3 majority. Then you need 2/3 of the states to agree. They have 50 states. So the 50 states, no, not Rajya Sabha, the states. Yeah, both Congress has to agree at a 2/3 majority in Congress, plus you need 2/3 of all the states to agree. Okay, so it's very difficult to amend the US Constitution, and that is why they have essentially managed. I personally feel that's one of the reasons that has actually, but clearly we can see that making a constitution difficult to amend does not impede your economic progress, which eventually, if you want to be a big military power, you need to have a strong economy. You can't be a big military power without a strong economy, right? Are you guys following what we are saying? This is important lesson to understand, that because even though we have amended 101 times, we have not really achieved our potential as a country. Yes, 1 minute, yeah. JNK is tyranny in what sense?
Like all the things that happen there, like closing down of internet services and all these.
Yeah, so that's a subjective assessment. See, tyranny is, for instance, a subjective assessment.
Perception.
See, people who agree with those policies will say it's not tyranny, and those who feel they don't agree with the policies, they will say tyranny is, again, remember, it's a subjective assessment. Okay, so if I have a very strong, like some people might say that in China you have a tyranny of the Communist Party, but if people say that some people who feel that the Chinese Communist Party has done a great deal of work for economic development in China, they would not call it tyranny, right? Because you have to remember also, in China it's very easy for them to take decisions. They don't have the problems that we have. You see, Parliament makes a law, then there's all this agitation. There's no agitation in China, okay? You cannot agitate. They will just chop your head off. So there is no agitation in China. It's very easy to get things done. You want to do something, they just do it straight. All right. So therefore, it's a question of tyranny. Is a question. It's a subjective question. It depends on which side of the fence you are. Okay. All right. Yes.
So can we say the political party, change the constitution for their own benefit?
Yes, of course. Of course. No question about that. That's what political party, what Gagan is saying, this political parties are amending the constitution for their own benefit. Obviously. So every political party which has a parliamentary majority has amended the constitution for their own benefit.
Like in the past 6 years, there is a Congress rule in India, and they have made so many changes.
Yeah. So most of the, for instance, if you go back to most of the reservation amendments, okay, every time what was happening is the government was saying that we will try to increase the reservation, and Supreme Court was trying to shoot it down and control the reservation, and so those reservation amendments were mostly under the Congress. Okay, so it depends, and different times, different governments, sometimes they want to raise tax revenue, so they have a negative tax judgment against them in the Supreme Court. They will change the tax laws because they want more money, right? Okay.
So
All right.
can this lead to a loophole in a government?
It's a loophole in the sense that this is the flaw in the design of the constitution, that it is very easy to amend.
Like there is a case going on, Amit Shah, Home Minister,
Yeah.
and he is the Home Minister of India. So one can find a way loophole.
Yeah, there are flaws in the system. There are flaws in the system. Okay, don't laugh at this question. See, the basic principle is, see, some of your seniors also, like they get very nervous about asking questions because other classmates are laughing at them when they're asking questions. So nobody should laugh at somebody. If he has a question, he'll ask a question. Sometimes I might decide that, okay, your question is not directly relevant to the course. We can discuss it later outside in the class. But nobody should be laughing at people's questions, okay? Because we want to encourage people to ask questions. That is the main reason you come to class. Yeah. So yeah, what you're hinting at essentially is the views of the parliament, the constitutional amendment process, which is true. That is the root of the problem, is how they made the constitution very easy to amend. They should not have done that. Big mistake. That's why I showed you the example of the US. The makers of the constitution, framers in India, made a mistake, because the US has proved that you do not need to have a constitution that is easy to amend to achieve economic prosperity. They have proved it clearly. Sorry. Yeah.
Is it harmful to amend the constitution frequently? If we frequently amend the constitution, it may be harmful for the country also.
Yeah, that depends on, see, harmful, just like he was saying tyranny in JNK. These are subjective assessments. So harmful or beneficial, that depends on where you stand.
So because 100 times we have changed the constitution.
Yeah. So I personally think it is harmful because it has given too much power to Parliament, and it has diluted the system of checks and balances. So from that point of view, because for me this system is the most important, this separation of powers and acting as each branch acting as a check on the other branch, this system, I place a high importance on this system. So from my point of view, I would say it's harmful. But harmful and tyranny, all these things, these are subject, depends on which side you are on, right?
But as we adopted it, it is required to make amendment regularly. As we adopted the constitution, we didn't make our
constitution. So it may be required to.
Yeah, that's what. So these are not clear-cut questions. That depends. Like what he's saying is that he's suggesting it was harmful. You're suggesting it was not harmful, it was required. So there's no end to this discussion because these are subjective assessments, right? It's like saying I like pizza, then you'll say you don't know, I think pizza is a bad dish. So this is a subjective assessment. So there's no end to this discussion, right? But it's okay. So you ask the question, and then I'll clarify that some of these questions are subjective. Okay, we'll come to this. Is this clear, guys? We have spent a little bit of time on this, but I hope you understand. Okay. Okay, that's okay. You may clear it, but if people have questions, we have to allow them to ask questions. All right. Okay, guys, now there's one more point which I wanted to mention. There is a new discussion that is happening in terms of what you see, especially in the US, is I would recommend everybody. What is the problem there? There's some problem. Impeachment and all that is happening. So what I would recommend to everybody in general is that please keep a sharp eye out of the US, follow the US economy, follow the developments in the US economy. There's a lot to learn. It's a very developed economy, and because there's a lot of this garbage going on everywhere, you hear that India and China are going to overtake the US. So I would just like to make a statement, which is recorded statement, that this is all garbage. Okay, forget about my lifetime. Even in your lifetime, the US is going to remain the most dominant economy. Okay, especially if Trump wins a second term, because the policies are very pro-business. The economy is going gangbusters. They can't find people. They have 7.5 million open jobs. There are only 6 million unemployed people. The economy is very strong. They're building up the military again. The US will remain far ahead of both India and China, even in your lifetime. So if you keep a sharp eye out on following what's going on, it gives you a very good understanding of what a developed economy looks like. You get a lot of ideas from there. Okay, so a lot of these Indian business school students have this attitude that, oh, we are only focused on the Indian, we need to only focus on the Indian market. That's a wrong attitude. You should have a global perspective, and an important part of that is keeping an eye on the US economy, what's going on there. Yeah.
There's a statement by Trump that the USA and India is a developing economy, not developing.
Who?
Trump has said.
Yeah, actually what he's contesting is the developing economy status of India and China under the WTO. Okay, because he's saying they're getting too good a deal. Alright. So anyway, so the point I'm trying to emphasize here is that we get to learn a lot about what goes on. Even politics is also important. One of the problems one of the problems that Donald Trump is facing as president is there are a lot of the, in the government, executive branch, you understand?
Yes, sir.
The police is the part of which branch? Executive branch. Okay. So our intelligence agencies, RAW, CBI, all are part of executive branch. Okay, so all report eventually to the Prime Minister. So in the executive branch, there are actually two parts. Okay, we should now think about the executive branch as having two parts. The two parts. Now remember, in India, who is the head of the executive branch? If you want to name the person.
President.
Yeah, he's the titular head of the executive branch. Constitutionally, he is officially the de jure head of the, de jure means by law, but de facto essentially he is bound by the Prime Minister and the cabinet, the advice of the Prime Minister. So effectively, the head of the executive branch is the Prime Minister. Okay. Now, is the Prime Minister also a part of the legislature?
Yes.
Yes, he's a member of parliament. So essentially what we have, the system we have, you understand the difference between the UK system and the UK and India on one side, and the US. Okay, in UK and India, Boris Johnson is the Prime Minister. He's also the head of the majority party in parliament. Same with India, Mr. Modi is the head of the majority party in parliament. That's why he becomes Prime Minister. Okay, so there is a sort of slight merging of these two branches, right? Overlap, you can say. But in the US, does Donald Trump sit in the legislative branch? No. So the US system of separation of powers is much purer, much more strict, because the president is separately elected directly by the people. Okay, so he's separately elected, and the legislature is also separately elected by the people. and they are not connected to each other in that sense, okay, in the sense that you see in India and UK. So the US system has a more pure system of separation of powers, okay, which again might give you a hint, because the US is far ahead of both UK and India, even though the UK is actually many years older than the US, right? So the US managed to defeat a power like the UK and then eventually become the global superpower. So there's something to be said. This is why one of the reasons you should study the US Constitution, how the system works, what made them so successful. It's not an accident. It's not an accident that they are so successful, right? Just like we should also be asking this question, why did a bunch of white people come and colonize us? Why did we go and colonize the white people? Is it just a coincidence?
No, sir.
Or is there something more to it? Nobody asks this question. You'll notice, has anyone ever asked you this question in this country? Nobody ever asked this question. Were they doing something right? Were we doing something wrong? Okay. Did we lose touch with the essence of our, civilization and all that? Okay. Those are bigger questions, but I'm just stimulating those ideas in your head. Okay. So is this clear? That the point I want to emphasize is that the executive branch has two parts. Okay. One is the part that comes and goes with elections. So if, let's say, for the sake of argument, if the BJP loses the next election, will the next finance minister be from the BJP? No. But will there be some IS officers in the finance department who will still be there?
Yes, sir.
Right? So the executive branch has two parts, two types of entity, people in the executive branch. One is the set of people who are basically coming in and going out based on elections. Who wins the election, and then some of them go out. But there's also a part of the executive branch which is what we call the unelected bureaucracy. Are the IS officers elected by the people?
No, sir.
No. So these are the unelected bureaucrats. Okay, so it's important to understand, based on what we have seen in the US recently, this has made it a topical thing to study, okay, which is that the idea that the executive branch has two types of people who come and go with elections, like Mr. Modi, Mr. Piyush Goyal and all these people, but also the unelected bureaucrats who don't come and go with elections. They are permanent, right? They are permanent. So these people, what we call, the term that is used to describe them is called the deep state. Okay, because they are kind of hidden, you don't think of them, because you think of finances being done by the finance minister, etc. But this is basically, it has been referred to in the US as the unelected fourth branch of government. But as your batchmate correctly pointed out, I think Janvi Umad in the other class pointed out, that it should not be referred to as a fourth branch of government, because it's actually part of the executive branch. Okay, it is part of the executive branch, because if you go back to our principles of taxonomy, minimize the number of high-level taxa. So when something can be put inside the executive branch, you don't create a separate category for it, because in any case these are part of the executive branch. Are you following this idea? Okay, so very good point that she made in the other class. All right. So, but in the US they have started referring to this as the unelected fourth branch of government. That's why I've used this term. Okay, but it is actually part of the executive branch, which has two types of entities. So you can read this article from The Hill. So one of the problems, interesting to follow the US, one of the problems that Donald Trump is facing is, because he has been a very disruptive, he came with the idea of disrupting. He said, I'm going to change the old ways of doing business. Okay, now whether you agree with his policies or not, but he came clearly with that message. And then he got elected, and then what he's trying to do is basically, because the US government had become very centralized in terms, there's a lot of bureaucracy in the US government, he's trying to cut down the bureaucracy and, decentralize power. Now, people in Washington who have been set in the old ways for many years, they've been operating like this, because Republicans, Democrats, nobody has disturbed the way of the old way of working. So that's why many of the bureaucrats in Washington are very angry with Trump. So they're trying to unseat him. So many of these attacks that you're seeing through impeachment and the other investigations, he's basically had investigations throughout his term. He's never been able to sleep in peace. He's always being attacked. This is all coming from the unelected bureaucrats. The intelligence agencies were spying on him. Imagine that the FBI and the CIA were conspiring to dethrone this elected. I mean, when you look at it democratically, you could like or dislike Trump, but if you look at it from a process point of view, he's a democratically elected president, but the unelected bureaucrats are trying to dethrone him. They're trying to get rid of him by plotting against him behind the scenes. So it's quite scary, actually, think about it from a process point of view. So this is something that could technically happen also in India, because we have that, and we do know that Mr. Modi has been very strict with the IS officers were sitting in with they used to have their golf clubs in their offices, but now he's cracking down because he demands a lot of accountability. These guys are having to work hard. So many of the bureaucrats are said to be quite unhappy with him because he's making them work too hard. So technically this can also happen in India. Okay, what has happened there, the situation is the same, because we do have an unelected branch. So we need to look at the unelected sort of sub branch. Okay, this is an idea I wanted to just give you, because in the Pol Science textbooks you will see only these 3 branches, because they don't update the textbooks to reflect what is going on in the real world. Okay, next point we are going to discuss is we are going to keep on moving like this from point to point. Okay, and by and large I have highlighted everything, and you have all the notes. You have to just make sure that you understand this. First point of distinction we want to understand is what is normative versus what is positive. Okay, we can all see the casualties as we move forward. Many people are falling asleep, but that's okay. Falling asleep is no problem. Talking is the problem. Okay, normative versus positive is the first one. Okay, in abortion you have to understand these terms that they use in the US. It's useful to know the labels. Pro-life is basically those who are opposed to abortion. Okay, because pro-life, because they feel that life begins at conception. Okay, from the point of conception the fetus is a living being. And pro-choice means the woman should have the choice. Now whether or not the abortion should be, whether or not there should be an abortion, this should be the woman's choice. And the extreme forms of this view are that these guys, extreme forms, not everybody has the extreme form, but the extreme form is the other, no abortion at all, ever. And these guys' extreme form view is that abortion can happen anytime, including after birth. Now these people have come up with a new idea that even after birth, what they do is they don't revive the baby. They are having a discussion with the doctor, is having a discussion with the mother, and they just decide not to revive the baby. So that is also a way. So that is these are the extremes, but not everybody has the extremes. But this is what it means. This is what choice and life. So the question now is, okay, now Geetika is very busy playing with her phone. Yes, are you following what the discussion is in the class? You're following it. Okay. I'm not very convinced with your answer, but anyway. Okay, so you understand what is normative versus positive. What is this a normative debate or what? Or a positive debate? Normative. Okay. Okay, so normative essentially is something which is, you can understand it in the from the point of view of subjective. Normative is typically more like subjective, and we've got these distinctions. Okay, we are discussing all these other distinctions also. It's all written here. Okay, subjective versus objective is the most easy for you guys to understand. Okay, what is subjective and what is objective? So if I tell you something, let's first understand this maybe. If I say to you, if I give you an instruction saying that whenever it gets warm, switch on the AC. Is that a subjective instruction or objective? Objective.
Sir, subjective.
Subjective. What is warm?
What is warm for somebody and what is warm for
Okay, say Karthik can say even 45 Celsius is not warm for me. How do you say that he's wrong? You can't prove that he's wrong. Not warm for me. So if I say that turn on the AC whenever it gets warm, it's a subjective instruction. It's not a clear instruction, because what is warm?
Exactly.
Right? So if I now say that turn on the AC whenever it exceeds 32 Celsius,
Then it's
now it's objective, because everybody's understanding of 32 Celsius is the same. Okay, is this clear? So the first distinction, probably the easier, maybe I should have discussed this first. The subjective versus objective is easier to understand. Okay, so if we go back now here between normative and positive, now if you understand this whole abortion debate, is this a subjective or objective debate?
subjective.
It is very subjective, because you can't prove that the other party is wrong actually. Okay, because it's a policy matter. So generally most policy is deals with normative questions. Should we have reservations? Should we give reservation to Jats? Should we give reservation to Gujars? These are all policy questions. These are, you cannot say this is wrong or right. It's all question of, these are normative questions, right? So, therefore, this is a normative debate. What we are trying to understand is a normative debate typically tends to be subjective. Okay, we have given you a link here. You can read this link. Yeah, positive and normative, you can read it. Essentially, normative talks about, okay, it's what ought to be, what should be. So if I say that, you know, constitution should not be so easy, the constitution should not be so easy to amend. Okay, so I'm criticizing the current amendment procedure, and so that's a normative or positive?
Normative.
That's a normative statement, because I'm saying that it should not be so easy. Is this clear? All right. And positive is just a statement about what is. Now, positive statement need not be true. Okay, it's a statement which is about the state of affairs, like this one here. The moon is made of green cheese. Is the moon made of green cheese? No. But this is a positive statement because you are describing, it's a descriptive kind of statement. It may be wrong, but you have to look at the nature of the statement. The nature of the statement is such that it is describing something. It's not saying the moon should not be so far away, okay, or the moon should be more bright. It's not saying these kind of statements. It's not making a statement about what should be, right? It is telling you about what is. It's making a statement about the state of affairs, which may be wrong. Statement may be wrong, but you have to look at the nature of the statement. Is this clear? Okay, these are some theoretical concepts you should be clear about. Okay, we can see very many people are very bored. Farhan looks very bored, finding it boring. Okay, so we just have to persevere with these ideas. Should be clear to you. So this normative abortion debate is a normative debate. Now, what about this? Is this a positive debate, or is this a debate about a positive question?
Positive.
It's a positive question. We should not say it's a positive debate. Actually, this is not a right way to word it. Is this a debate on a positive or a normative? Because I'm telling you so much about the use of the language. Is this a debate on a normative or a positive issue or point? Okay, or statement or whatever. We'll read that. A positive issue. We can just write issue. Okay, is this clear that everybody here? Is this clear that this is a positive? This is a debate on a positive issue or a positive question? The right way to use this is a positive question. Are you guys following? Generally, section A seems to be getting bored much quicker than section B. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay, guys. So this is clear that this is a positive statement. This is a debate about a positive issue. Huh?
Your statement was also normative.
Which one?
Section A.
Section A. No, that's a positive statement, because I'm observing that in section B people are generally not so bored, but in section A people are getting more people look very bored in section A. I'm observing that for the last two classes. Yeah. Okay, guys, is this clear that this is a positive? So what the point of understanding this is that you might have understood now. You might realize now. There's a lot of noise levels in the class, high noise level in the class. Okay, now you might, if you look back on your life, you might realize that what we're trying to tell you is that be careful about arguments which are not value neutral. Okay, so for instance, argument, what is a value, not value neutral? So be careful about the usage. So the abortion debate is not value neutral. Okay, because you understand what value system is? You know what a value system is? Like some people might, maybe your elders, maybe your grandfather and all, they may have a more conservative value system. Yeah. They might feel that you should not be going out late at night, drinking this, that. Okay. So that is a conservative value system. A more liberal value system might be that, okay, people can do whatever they want. They are adults now. Okay, they can smoke, drink, whatever. Right? So that's an example of a value system, right? So this is what we mean. A value system essentially consists of a set of values. Okay, so what we say is that what we are saying is that the abortion debate is not value neutral. In the sense, do you think this debate will ever end? Let's say I'm pro-life and somebody is pro-choice, and we keep debating. Is this ever going to end? It's never going to end, because it is driven by differences in value systems. Okay, my value systems, let's say, more conservative. Maybe I'm a religious person, then the other person is more liberal in the social sphere. Okay, and so that's why they have this view. So this kind of debate, which is deriving from the disagreement, is deriving from differences in value systems. These debates have no end. Okay, be quiet here. There's too much noise coming up. Actually, just have to wait for a few more minutes. Okay, practice this discipline. When you get bored in the class, this is part of your training. When you get bored in the class, instead of you starting to talk to your friends, try to concentrate, force yourself to concentrate, or go to sleep. Okay, so like some people have been practicing, which is fine. No, I have no problem with that. Okay, now don't laugh at those who are sleeping. They're following the instructions. That's fine. So the point we're trying to make is, understand that if you are locked in an argument, when you're involved in an argument, you should ask yourself, is this argument value neutral or not? Are you following? So as an example of a value neutral argument, what we are saying is the abortion debate is not value neutral. Yes, you're looking blank. Are you able to follow the statement?
Yes, sir.
That the abortion debate is not value neutral, because if it were value neutral, it would be independent of your value system. Here, this debate is not independent of your value system. We say, therefore, it's not a value neutral debate.
It would have been more fact based.
Yeah, it would have been more based on facts. So is this clear? So when you see these debates, don't get involved in them, because you might notice that many debates in your life that you get into are actually not value neutral.
Yes.
So it's a waste of time, because you can argue till the cows come home and nothing will ever be resolved. Yeah? Yes, what is the question?
All the debates are normative.
Not necessary, because it depends. Suppose I say, okay, suppose we are having a debate on what is the distance from New York to Baghdad.
3 lakh kilometers.
Maybe you say it's 6,000, I say it's 3,000. We can solve that. We can just go to Google Maps, and if we are having, so I wouldn't agree that all debates. Is this another example, guys? Now you understand what is a debate? This is an example of a value neutral debate. If we are having an argument about, let's say, as he's saying, Baghdad, right? So if you are arguing about the distance between New York and Baghdad, right? Then in that case, and somebody says it's 3,000 miles, somebody says it's 5,000 miles, we can fix that very soon, very quickly. Do you agree?
Driven by facts.
It's based totally on facts. If we agree on what is a kilometer, this is not a problem to resolve. We go to Google Maps and we agree with what they say, right? So we can resolve this. Now this is not a value neutral, this is a value neutral argument. Okay, so this kind of argument is worth having, because you can figure out the answer eventually. You can learn something. This is clear? Alright? Okay, so this second debate is a debate on a positive questions. Distance from here to Pitampura is, you can figure out once again from Google Maps what is the actual distance, so you can resolve this problem. So this is a debate on a positive question. Okay, all right. Okay, so that's all we are saying here. Now this is just what we want to understand. Okay, here now the point is that a positive statement need not be true. Okay, a state which is basically, this has to be verifiable or falsifiable. Okay, like the moon is made of green cheese, the example that they gave you, right? That statement is not true, but you can actually prove it to be false. Now here, this brings us to an important question. I've given you this link. There's a philosopher called Karl Popper who's done a lot of important work. Very important concept for you to understand, that relates to the philosophy of science. What is a scientific statement? Okay, what is a scientific statement? Because in your life you will meet a lot of people who pretend to be experts and are making pronouncements on all kinds of things. Sometimes they're claiming that they're scientific, but there is actually a critical test of what is a scientific statement according to Karl Popper's theory of science, okay, which is a very well accepted theory. Now, where is this theory of science? Yeah, you can read about this, but I'll just give you the brief idea. You can read the background here. The idea of a scientific statement is this, that the scientific statement must be falsifiable. Okay, what is the meaning of falsifiable? It has to be so specific that it is capable of being proved false. Okay, so now if I make a statement that Roger Federer is less than 6 feet tall, is this a falsifiable statement? No?
Yes, sir. You can make that.
What am I saying? I'm identifying a person, Federer. I'm making a specific statement. I haven't said that he's not tall enough.
It is a falsifiable statement.
I have made a specific statement that he is less than 6 feet tall. Is that a very specific statement?
Yes, sir.
You can just line him up against the wall and measure. In fact, this statement is false because he is more than 6 feet tall. But the point is that you see the statement is very specific. I am not saying he is not tall enough. If I said tall enough, then you can't falsify it. Because I'll say if you're not as tall as LeBron James, you're not tall enough. Then I can say, so then you can't prove that it is false. Is this clear? Are you following what I'm saying? This is a very important thing to understand, because when you are listening to experts talking about topics and they are making, you'll find many of them make very loose general statements. Those are not scientific statements because they cannot be falsified. Okay, in the sense, if I say that something is, it is very warm and mercury is very warm or something like that. These are very general statements. These are not specific enough, so you can't falsify it. So if I say that the moon is made of green cheese, is that a scientific statement?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Some people are saying
It is because
Bodhi Raja says it's not false. It's not a scientific.
It is a scientific statement. It can be.
It is scientific. Yes. Aman, why is it scientific? Now explain to me. The answer is in front of you. If the moon is made of green cheese, is a scientific statement. Why?
So that is falsifiable.
Not falsifiable. Okay, so it is capable of being proved to be false, right? Is this clear? It's a specific statement. You can take a section of the moon. It doesn't have to be technologically possible. It just should be theoretically possible. You can cut off a section of the moon. You can send Hanumanji there. He can cut off a section, and you can see that it is not made of green cheese. Yes? Is this clear?
Yes, sir.
Now you understand what is meant by a scientific statement? That it has to be falsifiable. The exact word we are looking for is falsifiable. It doesn't actually should not be verifiable. I should not put this verifiable here. I want to make this because we moved away from verificationism. Verifiable is very different from, let me just remove this. Okay, in the case of a positive statement we can have this, but in the case of a scientific statement it is falsifiable. Okay guys, Walia, be quiet. From the next class onwards, now I'll start deducting marks, because so marks deduction should be for the group as a whole, or should be individual? Individual. Okay. So every time I catch you doing anything which is not allowed, which is talking, disturbing others, okay, you will lose 2%, and that will be taken out of your end term grades. So it is going against, usually it goes against the CP grade, but that's on a group basis, but I'll take it out of your end term grades. So please remember that, okay, for the next class onwards we are going to deduct marks. Okay, so first this point is clear. You understand, very important point, because you need to be able to test when you are listening to media personalities talking about the economy, etc., economists. Try to analyze which of their statements can be called scientific statements. Are they so specific that they can be proved false? Mostly they are all garbage. They say, oh, the economy will be quite strong. What is the meaning of quite strong? 4%, 6%, 9%, 15%. It's a meaningless statement. Okay. If you say that the economy will in next quarter the economy will grow by 3.5%, that's a falsifiable statement. You understand that? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Ria is not convinced. Is this clear? The last statement is falsifiable? Okay. I'll release the rest of the class. You guys can go. You can come here. I'll explain to you. So the recording. So in this case, when we have a recording which extends beyond the class because somebody has asked a question, that recording is also part of your syllabus. Okay. So whatever I explained to her, because I'm sure many other. It's just that she's asking the question. I'm sure many others are also confused, but they have not asked the question. Okay. So the rest of you guys can go. And now she's regretting that she asked the question because now she has to come here. No. So the first statement, if I make the statement that the economy will be very strong in the next quarter, Is this a scientific statement? What is our test of a scientific statement? Our test of a scientific statement is that it has to be falsifiable. So if you apply that test and I tell you that the economy will be very strong in the next quarter, is that a falsifiable statement?
Sir, it is not very specific.
It's not?
It's not very specific.
It's not very specific, so you can't falsify it. So if I say the economy will be very strong in the next quarter, and actually the economy maybe grows by 0.001%, but I'll say that's also strong. I never gave you a specific number, right? Are you following? That I never gave you a specific number, but now if I say that in the next quarter GDP growth will be 3.5%, okay, or more than 3.5%. Now that is a specific statement, very specific. So all you have to do is you have to wait till the end of the next quarter till the GDP data comes out, and you can see what the reading is, and if it is less than 3.5 or more than 3.5, I can either way. Remember, falsifiable does not mean it has to be false. It has to be capable of being proved to be false, which means you have to look at not the statement itself. Yes, you have to look at it to see whether it's specific, but you have to analyze the nature of the statement. Is it something which is capable of being proved to be false? Okay, which means you can, and if you prove that it is not false, that is also the same as proving that it is false. Like if the growth is 4.5% and I said it will be greater than 3.5%, the statement itself is capable of being proved to be false, because all you have to do is wait till the end. After the quarter, you can see that the data comes out what the actual figure is. Now I made a specific statement. So the idea of specificity is intimately connected to the idea of falsifiability, because usually statements which are not falsifiable are essentially not sufficiently specific. Like I say that, oh, economy, most of the time experts on TV you'll find they will make general statements, not specific.
What if I say a positive statement and there is not a way, there is no way to test it yet? Like I say that, for example, for suppose we don't know about Pluto right now, and I say that Pluto is this much kilometers far. So what about that? Is that
That even there we don't consider the current limitations of technology. It just has to be that it should be theoretically possible to prove that it is false. So you assume,
if we don't have a way to test it, or if we don't have any basis for calculating it also,
in that sense,
falsify.
yeah, in that sense, so you can qualify that statement a little bit, but it is still technically falling under the reason, like if you have the technology, okay, assuming that we don't have the technology to go to the moon, okay, so we say that this, but it's still a statement which is, if you had the technology, you could prove it to be false. The nature of the statement is specific. Okay, so you can assume that technology limitations will also be removed. You have to really look at the essence of the nature of the statement. Yeah? Okay.